Good morning, patrons. Having coffee, still in my pajamas. I am here in Pago Pago, American Samoa. It's spelled P-A-G-O, P-A-G-O, but I guess in Samoan the G's are pronounced with an N, so Pago Pago. I had this idea to start doing these passage debriefs for you guys, where I'll sit down and just like kind of talk about the passage, and cut in some visuals of stuff I filmed, just for the patrons as a thank you. On that note, I want to thank you so much for your support and for coming on board and being part of the, Patreon crew for Trite and myself. I'm a terrible businessman, and I don't ask for help, and I don't really promote my Patreon, and I hope that you guys see. So if you're here as a patron, that means that you took the initiative to be like, tell me that you see value in what I'm doing, and so thank you so much. I'm small potatoes compared to a lot of the channels, and I really appreciate all of you that have come on board to contribute to this totally wild dream that I have. So, in relation to that, I want to start doing these debriefs after the longer passages, and especially as like the content stacks up. It's going to be a minute before this passage video that I just filmed is available for anyone to see. So, I've made some notes. We are here, like I said, in Pago Pago. It's a very rainy morning, which is kind of nice. Maybe I'll walk you and show you the deck real quick, and then we'll come back, sit down, and have a conversation about the passage. First, I gotta have a sip of coffee. It's very rainy, so I don't know that we'll go outside the canopy. Very, very beautiful mountains here. This harbor is kind of rough, not crime or anything, but very polluted harbor and pretty noisy and stuff, but it's a nice, safe, stable anchorage to kind of rest and recoup and do some repairs in. There's an Eva bird flying up there. At night there's flying foxes that fly all over, which are amazing. So that's our little rainy day view. Oh, and let me see here. Okay, let's see, what do we got here? I made a bunch of notes that I'm going to be referencing so that I know what to talk about. And, like, if any of you followed along on the blog posts, a lot of this is probably redundant, so you already read about what I'm going to be talking about, maybe. So, overall, the passage was, it was great. A great success. It was just ocean sailing. It's a funny thing I've noticed. So this was my third longest passage. It was 1,110 nautical miles, and we covered that in 10 days, which is awesome. I much prefer 10 days over 26 days or 32 days, and we made great speed. When you're downwind sailing with following seas, the boat is it's like driving like big, huge S-curves, basically. The waves are so powerful coming directly from behind that as they pass you and you surf, you get a great speed advantage, but it steers the boat off one way or it steers the boat off the other way. And this is just like a repeated thing. And the hydrovane did a fantastic job of getting us back on course. You'll hear people complain online, oh, they do terrible downwind, which is total bullshit. They do fantastic. But I think what people think, or maybe they just don't have much ocean sailing experience, is that there's no way around that. Like if you had a super high-powered electronic version, it might counter it a little bit better than a hydrovane, but it's also put in an extreme amount of like wear on that autopilot, which means that eventually that thing is going to burn out quicker than it would, you know. It's definitely going to burn out before a hydrovane burns out. Hydrovane, they don't burn out. So it's just part of life when you're sailing with following seas and downwind. But once you get used to it, it's fine. It's a little tricky cooking, but it's always tricky cooking underway. But you just kind of learn how to like balance and brace yourself and kind of anticipate the big rolls. And that's just life at sea. As soon as I got through the pass at Bora Bora, it was a beautiful day, sunny day, cleared the pass and the reefs, I was able to kill the engine right away and sail wing and wing for the first, let me see how many days. For the first like 7 days I was wing and wing, and we had great winds. The wind slowly built, so like day 6 and 7 is like when we saw the highest winds, which were about 23 knots, 20 to 25 knots constant, and then higher with the gusts. But sailing wing and wing, you don't notice it nearly as much as sailing on a tack, where it can lay the boat over. She just kind of does her own thing. She just kind of powers through. So pretty comfortable. I was kind of shocked. The seas, the biggest seas I saw were like 3.5 meters. So, you know, 10 to 12 feet roughly. And they weren't too gnarly. So, but that was I only saw a couple of those. Most of the waves were like, you know, 8 to 9 foot regular throughout the majority of the passage. And again, the bigger seas were just at that when those winds got up above like 23 knots for days on end. And then the other thing I was shocked about is when the winds tapered off on day 8, they backed, which means, so like winds clock or back. And if they back, it means they go counterclockwise. And if they clock, that means they go with the clock. So they backed to the northeast from the east. And when it did that, we couldn't sail wing and wing, so reconfigured and went on a starboard tack. And that's right after that is when we had like 24 hours of squalls, and that one really bad squall. And I'm gonna get to like all this stuff. There's like a number of things. I guess I wrote in my notes, one of the first things, I wrote, the passage overall was a very easy passage with very stressful but solvable bumps in the road. So we'll talk about the bumps in the road after this. But yeah, so we got on the starboard tack, we sailed for a couple days, and then we had good wind until that last, like, I don't know, 24 hours when the wind totally kind of went away. But yeah, as far as these bumps in the road, like, sailboats go through like a tremendous amount of abuse. So maintenance is just a constant. It's just a reality. It doesn't matter if the boat's brand new, straight out of the factory, or if it's an old boat, or anything in between. There's always going to be things breaking, or that need attention, or that need repair. That's just how life is. We had some, let's see what, here, let me get to my list here. The first thing that happened that was funny, it was in the middle of the night. We took a big roll, the head door like popped open, like I guess the latch was obviously closed, but it was a big enough roll that the door like hinges in the middle. So it popped the door open, and when it flew open, it like pulled the entire door out of the board that has the hinges, so it was like a tongue and groove. So this stayed, like the hinges stayed attached and everything, and the door just kept flying. So it didn't break it just came apart. And I repaired it yesterday. You may have seen it in the cockpit. Went and bought wood glue, got it all put back together. I'm gonna add some little nails to it today, just so that it's like an extra sort of strength to that joint. But that was funny, it just went flying off. I just put it forward and it was no problem. The bilge pump, something happened. It stopped working after this chaos with the bilge filling up that we'll talk about in a second, but I think there's a short in the, so I have 2 floats in the bilge. One is a high water alarm that sets off an alarm and turns on the bilge pump even if the switch on the nav station is turned to the off position. Well, when you put in the fuse right now, like all the lights come on and the alarm goes off, even though there's like no water in the bilge. So I think there's a short in that emergency like high water alarm float. That's one of the things I have to repair before I sail to Fiji on Tuesday. Today is Thursday. So that happened at the very end. So that has to be dealt with. The 2 of the mast slides like chafed through the webbing. One of them I lashed like mid-passage, which is no problem. I just lowered the sail, went up, clipped myself to the mast, and then just lashed it with Dyneema. That was no problem. And then I had to do another one later on. The boom came off the mast, which was very shocking, and that was on day 8. So on day 8, when the squalls, like when the wind backed and we were on a starboard tack, I had quite a bit of sail out. Luckily I had 2 reefs in the mainsail, and I had a lot of headsail out, and I was asleep, and we got hit with this, probably the 3rd worst squall I've ever been in. The winds had to have been over 35 knots. It laid the boat completely over. So like I went out on deck and paid the main out really far, which means I slacked the main sheet so that the boom goes really far because it depowers it and then the boat stands up. And then I shortened the headsail, so I made it smaller. And then you do that and you come down below and you just let the boat sail until the squall is done, and then you go back up, tighten up the main sheet, and get everything reset to like regular sailing. So I did that, came down below. The squall lasted probably half an hour or more. It was longer than usual, and it was very strong the whole time, like shockingly strong. Like I usually say, I had a lot of teeth. And right at the end of it, as with all squalls, when the squall passes, there's a period of calm right after, where that squall is sucking all the air out. And so there's a still air before the prevailing trade winds come back in and fill in that spot. So there's a calm period. So as soon as we hit that calm period, I have the boom like way far out with the main sheet to depower it. And as soon as we hit that calm with the big seas, it like turned the boat just right. That boom flew across, crash jibed. And it wasn't far enough to like hit the rigging or anything, but when it reset, it bucked the boom so hard that it slid off the bronze track at the mast. So I'm down here, I just hear this terrible bang sound. And I was like, oh no. It was a sound where I was like, that is not good. And I popped my head out and looked out of the Dodger hatch, and the boom is just swinging attached to the mainsail, free from the mast. And I thought the gooseneck had broken. And I had inspected the gooseneck extensively the day before. So I was like, I knew all the cotter pins were there. I knew there were no cracks, because I go around every morning and do an inspection. And I'd really looked at that gooseneck, and it was fine. So I was like, oh my gosh, like, and it's solvable. Like I could have lashed the boom to it and could have easily sailed with just the headsail without the main. I wasn't like scared, but I was like, oh, this is gonna suck. And so I went up, and then I was stoked to see that it had just popped off of this slide. And the way to prevent that is, I used to have a downhaul on it, but when I changed my rigging setup with these like nice horns and the new mainsail, I removed the downhaul. So I just put the downhaul back on, which prevents it from being able to jump up. So when I get to New Zealand, I'm gonna do a kind of a more permanent fix that's like spliced lines specifically that will not allow it to travel past a certain point, because you want to travel a little bit so that you can get the mainsail really tight. So that was shocking. I just lashed it to the boom that night, and then the next day, between squalls, and I had to wait till like midday because there was squall after squall, I went out and was able to, and we were just sailing with headsail that whole night. I kept the main down. I went out and was able to get it back on the track, which is kind of a feat, and got it back on there safely, and between squalls, and we were good to go. And at that point, that's when I found another slide. Only 2 slides had to be relashed, but I found one that had chafed at a batten car point. So I went ahead and lashed that while the main was down and rehoisted it, and everything was good to go after that with that. The other sort of like very just scary thing that happened, not scary, disturbing, alarming, I would say. When your Traitea is very low freeboard, which means that there's not a lot of water between the level of the sea and the deck. Like old 60s boats, especially folk boats like this, they had these kind of beautiful lines. They were low to the water, and they're real sexy until you're in very big seas. And then seas can come over and fill the cockpit very easily. And that happens kind of regularly. Like, we'll get hit just right from a wave, and the cockpit will be full of water like it's a bathtub. And when I hauled out Traitea originally, in Ventura, I replaced all the small cockpit drains with huge oversized drains and huge oversized sea cocks. I upsized everything to like 1.5 or 1.75, I can't remember. I think it's 1.5 Mondo drains on everything, so it drains quicker. So, you know, that's like, I've seen that happen a dozen times on different passages. The thing that was different was we got hit by a pretty big one, and there was the hatch was open like this much to get air in, and I had my little screen. I have like a bug screen I made in Lono Harbor that was over it, so that prevented a lot of water from coming in, but we probably got 2 gallons of water straight in onto the galley, just poured straight in. That's how big the wave was, and the wave was big enough that I saw the shadow before it hit, so it was a pretty big wave. And the only thing I can think that happened was that the cockpit locker on the starboard side, which is where my fuel tank is and my jerry cans for my diesel and everything, I didn't have the rubber latch down. I didn't have it latched down. And when the wave hit, it blew that cockpit locker open, and the entire wave went into that cockpit locker, which immediately flowed into the bilge. Because as soon as that hit, I stood up to close it, and like that, I was standing in ankle-deep water. We just got a massive amount of water. Oh, fuck. In the boat. So the floorboards were floating, and it was very, very, very alarming. I don't know that, I think it happened so fast that I don't know that I was scared, but I was extremely concerned. The main thing I was scared that it was going to contaminate all of my fresh water, because my whole water tank is there and it's all sealed up, but you know, you never know, right? So that was my biggest fear, was that I was going to contaminate my fresh water, which I have emergency water in jerry cans that are all separate from one another. So I wouldn't have been totally without fresh water, but that was like the big concern. And also I was like, how on earth is this possible? How is it possible for that much? Because my bilge under the engine is so deep, if I lay on my cabin sole and put my arm against the bottom, I cannot put my hand flat against the bottom of the bilge. That's how deep the bilge is. And that thing was full to the overflowing into the cabin sole. So that was very, very alarming. You don't want to be standing ankle deep in water in your boat ever. And with the bilge pump was still working at that point. I put it on manual mode and it was pumping out water, and I got the emergency bilge pump and I pumped, and it took us, the electric pump and me pumping, it took about 20 minutes to drain that bilge, which was kind of a wake-up call from me. And I have the biggest the biggest regular style bilge pump that you can buy on the market, like the highest volume one. But that situation told me that when I get to New Zealand, I'm gonna buy one for a big boat, for like a fishing boat, you know, like some kind of Mondo huge bilge pump as deep as this bilge is, and install it to really evacuate the water. I can't, because if I was taking on water, how do you keep up with that, you know? So that was kind of a wake-up call, that I want to change that. I also want to install two manual bilge pumps that are permanently installed, because I have like the one that you can move around, which is really good to have. But I want to install one in here where I can sit here and pump manually, and I want to install one in the cockpit so that they're separate, totally separate, so that if something bad happens and I'm waist deep in water in here and I can't be in here to pump it out, or if I'm close to land and I need to be at the helm while also pumping, then I can be out there while also getting the water out of the boat. So, and hopefully we'll never run into that situation, but it's something that I have to think about for sure. So that was pretty nerve-wracking. And then in relation to all of that, a couple days following that, I kept hearing water under the floorboards like sloshing. And so I was like, okay, well, it's from that situation. I pulled up, and I can't pull the whole floor out. I have to now, but you can only pull up these little boards. There's not much access. So, and I would sop up and clean the water up, and then like within a couple hours, I would hear water sloshing on top. And then I was like, are we taking on water? And I would check the deep bilge, and there was no water in it. And I would check the forward bilge by the head, and there was no water in it. So then I was like, is it coming from the water tank? I tasted it, it was salt water. I could not figure it out. And it was like, every time I cleaned it up, within 2 hours, there was water sloshing. It was only this much, but it was just like, and then I was like, I thought the depth sounder might be leaking, it's close enough that if the depth sounder was leaking, it would go straight there. So I ripped everything out and checked. That was dry as a bone, which was awesome. And so this thing was like haunting me for 2 days and like kind of freaking me out. And then all of a sudden my battery monitor just went out, just went blank. And I was like, so I ran out, checked the batteries, they were dry. I put a voltmeter on everything there, you know, and I knew I'm kind of neurotic about checking my battery level. I knew I had 49% battery still, because we had like those storms, and the panels had been down for days because the seas were too big to have the solar panels up. And with lithium batteries, 50% is plenty. Like we only had we were 170 miles, I think, or something, when around that to American Samoa. So I wasn't worried about the batteries dying on me, but I don't like not being able to see where they're at charge-wise. So I pulled everything out from under the cockpit block, under the chart table rather, and to see where the shunt is mounted. And when I pulled it all out, there's like 6 inches of standing water underneath the chart table, and the drain that leads from there to the deep bilge was clogged. So I pulled the steps off, I unclogged it, so any water that gets in those back, you know, because water gets in places, especially with an old boat. So any water that gets into those back cockpit lockers runs down and then drains into the bilge underneath. Same thing with the galley. So this one was clogged, so it was standing water, and it was finding its way on top of the tank, and that's what the sloshing was. So once I fixed that, I never had that problem again, but God, it was so stressful for a couple days. So that was that. So then my battery monitor, oh, and I saw there was like water had dripped down on the negative terminal and gotten onto the shunt and kind of shorted out the shunt. And then like a day later, it just came back on, but the volt reading is jacked. It says I have 0.17 volts, which if you look on the solar controller stuff, it shows that I have like, you know, 13.64 or something. I have plenty, everything's good. But the one benefit with it coming back on, even with the wrong volt, is that it shows the battery charge meter, which is all I care about. I'll replace that when I get to New Zealand, but that's the main thing, is I like to be able to visually see where my batteries are at. So I think that's about it. I've been talking too long now already. It's like 25 minutes in, so I apologize for being long-winded. Yeah, so I got in safe, and the clearing process was a nightmare, which I'll probably go into at some point. But all I'll say is, like, they made me send all of my documents to, and I'm not exaggerating, 70 different email addresses, and upload it to a government website. And they make you do this after you clear out of your other country, but they tell you, just because you're sending us the documents doesn't mean we're giving you, you're not guaranteed access to be allowed to visit American Samoa, even though I'm an American citizen and the borders are open. So none of this makes sense to me. But the messed up thing is, like, they make you clear out of French Polynesia, which means you have 72 hours before you have to leave, and they're not telling you that you're allowed to actually come there yet. And their system, their online system was so jacked, I just had to leave. And me and Sarah were texting on Iridium Go. We keep like a Google Drive where I keep all of my documents in there, so that if she has to send anyone anything while I'm at sea, then she's able to. And she had to go back and forth with them for like 2 days to figure out, to get all the proper, because their system was messed up and it was impossible for us to upload. So finally, they're like, okay, you can come. And I was already like 5 days in at that point. But, you know, but how, like, ridiculous is that system? And especially considering that if you, as an American citizen, if you come to American Samoa on a plane, you don't even need a passport. You just need a driver's license. You can literally just fly here like it's a state and just visit. And, like, walk off the plane, get back on the plane, no problem. And I had to send crazy amounts of documents. And then when I got here, the health department thing was insane. Which I understand, island nations and COVID, there's a lot of risk, whatever, but I'm fully vaccinated, boosted, sent them a negative test before I left, and they were like, you have to send us a PCR test. And I was like, you can't even get PCR tests in Bora Bora. I would have to go to Tahiti. I'm like, I'm not going to Tahiti when I've already sent you everything. And so they're like, okay, well, you'll be tested at the dock. So then they tested me at the dock when I got here, which is fine. But I got here, I had to deal with 12 different officials from 4 different departments, and then fill out all the same paperwork for each department that I had already sent to 70 email addresses and uploaded to the government website. And it took like 2 hours. And then, like, they had like 5 customs agents come on board. They pulled everything out, you know, and they're knocking, looking for drug compartments, which is fine. But it was just like bonkers. It was bonkers. And even still, from what I read online, when I go to clear out, they're going to charge me $150 for visiting, even though I'm an American citizen. And so it is what it is. But I'm gonna have to, you know, that's like, I expect this from other countries, but the fact that this is, you know, an American territory is a little bizarre to me, that I had to deal with all that. Especially when you can, like I said, you can just fly here on a plane with a driver's license and get off, and it's so wild. But that's just part of cruising, and I'm going to be dealing with a lot more. At least they speak English, so, you know, when I get to Indonesia, it's going to be even more difficult. So that's just something I have to get used to. Other than that, I've just been trying to get everything. Today is like a laundry day. I'm finally going to be able to go do all my laundry. Food is crazy cheap here, so I'm going to do a lot of provisioning while I'm here. And hopefully on Saturday I'll be able to go on, it's like real rainy right now, but hopefully Saturday I'll be able to go on a hike. I'd like to see some of the birds that live here. And just, you know, I met one other cruiser on a boat who's working on his boat, and I saw him when I was walking in town yesterday, and he was like, hey, you want to ride around with me? I'm like running errands and you can see the island. I was like, sure. So I went riding around with him all over the island yesterday. And it's very pretty here. Pretty simple, not a lot to do. You can't snorkel anywhere immediately around here because the harbor's so polluted, so you have to take a bus kind of far to go snorkeling. So it's kind of limited, but it's fine. I'm here to like rest and repair, and then we push for Fiji. I think right now is either Monday or Tuesday I'm going to be sailing to Fiji, if the weather allows. So this is a long-winded debrief. I'll try to make the future ones shorter. Let me know if you guys don't mind them being long-winded. Let me know. Otherwise, I apologize. But I am happy to be here in a stable, safe anchorage. Kind of get things cleaned up, dialed in, get my laundry. I'm very excited about laundry. And get some vittles and get a lot of work done, uploaded. I got edited 6 videos on the passage here, 6 new videos, a lot of the Society Islands videos. So last night I stayed up and uploaded 2 via my phone, and I'm uploading 1 right now. So getting some work done, and yeah, getting ready to push for Fiji. Fiji should be probably, it's 700 miles to Suva, and should be really good wind, more downwind sailing, so wing and wing, and it should be, you know, 7 or 8 days, depending. If the wind holds, it might be less than that. It might be 5 days. Considering we were doing like 130-mile runs, kind of a few days in a row on that last passage. So I'm excited for Fiji, and I'll be in Fiji. It looks like I'll probably get there around October 10th, and I plan on being there till around November 14th when I sail for New Zealand. For me, that's the big milestone. To hit New Zealand, that's like a big benchmark for me for the circumnavigation. And then I'll be in New Zealand, as I've said many times, until May, like through cyclone season. So, wild ride. I hope you guys like this debrief, and again, thank you so much for your support, and I hope you're enjoying the South Pacific episodes. There's a lot more to come, and I hope everyone has had a nice week. I hope if anyone's in Florida is watching this, you're safe. My little brother Scott lives in Tampa, and we were messaging. He never even lost power, but we were messaging him, me and my other brothers, last night, and we're like, are you okay? And he's like, mighty windy here. That was like his only review. He was bummed because he wanted, when the eye went over, he was gonna ride his motorcycle around and take video of the chaos. But he said the eye was going over them at like 2 a.m. so he didn't do that. But yes, I hope everyone's safe, and I hope everyone has a nice weekend. And thanks again, and I will see y'all on the flip side.